what they're doing? If anything, people, man, we're the power right here. We got a lot of young, intelligent people that need to step up. And these people up here that ain't stepping up, we need to ship them out.
Omitaki api, Jared hake machi api lo. Wanama sapi tiosh ba ematra na yuha chante waste na pechi api lo. Poya chik ala he mielo. Ikchewe chasha he macha.
See, right here is the black mold. That's another thing that's causing a lot of the sicknesses.
Black mold attacks young children the worst. Their entire respiratory system. You see 4 and 5-year-olds with that bottle of oxygen and that mask on their face. 4 and 5-year-olds. And of course, the elderly and the sickly, the sugar diabetics, they're prone and susceptible to that black mold, which attacks the respiratory system. Black mold is rampant throughout the 9 reservations in South Dakota and the reservations in North Dakota and Montana, the northern plains. And we have no relief. It's a national disaster area, but the governors refuse to call for it, and of course, Washington, D.C. refused to recognize it.
And these were supposed to be fixed 2 years ago. They still haven't come around yet. And the lights, this is burned out, but still hasn't been fixed. This window here too hasn't been replaced. We reported it last month and still hasn't been replaced.
We'll probably go through it like that all winter.
So we either fix it ourselves and pay for it out of our own pockets. That'll probably be the solution to that.
And I know that the cockroach feces makes you sick too.
I thought it does,
Yeah.
Yeah, I can
And the bad part is you get rid of them and they come back in about 3 months. We have to keep our food in plastic containers.
Plastic
Yeah.
so they can't get in. And this is the stove, huh?
This is the stove and it needs a knob.
Oh,
So I
yeah.
can't use the oven. Yeah.
Oh, you can't use the oven? Oh, this is a fly thing, huh? Can you shine your flashlight on that? Yeah. That catches the flies.
Yeah, fly ribbon.
Wow. Flies. Well, Emma gave us a grand tour, Matthew.
See, that's another one that's just,
Where's it? Oh, right back here.
yeah, it's eating away.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Nowhere else in the Western Hemisphere is the life expectancy so short. Not in the shanty towns of Rio de Janeiro, not in Guatemala, not in El Salvador, not in Mexico, nowhere. But on Indian reservations, our national life expectancy is 47 years of age.
We would like to invite the President of the United States to our house to visit with us, and we can take him all over to the hospitals, the schools, and to visit with neighbors and even us.
The reservation physical life is one of misery. Fortunately, we still have our culture, and that breathes life into us. I can't make an American understand because they have no culture. What I can tell you, and culture is beyond singing and dancing, by the way, and it's beyond, way beyond Wall Street or MTV. What culture is values, and we still have our spirituality. And I thank the Great Mystery for this beautiful land and the opportunity to be Lakota.
This is the corporate offices for Lakota Journal newspaper, Lakota Media Incorporated corporate offices, including our printing plant operations. This would be the editorial department of the newspaper where the writing staff would be located. To this area, we get back to our actual printing press. Our printing press, which prints our newspaper as well as the Dakota Journal, a new newspaper that we've started out on the eastern side of the state. With the printing press, owning our own printing presses, we'll be able to print other tribal newspapers and also allow us to print some of the other newspapers that we plan on, bureaus that we plan on opening in the near future. Our goal is to open a chain of newspapers that will serve the various Indian tribes across the country.
There's more money spent on convicts, on criminals, per day than is spent on health care for Native American people. Yet for succession of our lands, we were guaranteed these basic rights, of quality health care. So, more money is spent to house an inmate, a person who has committed crimes against society, than to provide health care to people that are trying to become an active member of society. And it's unfortunate. I mean, it's an atrocity that this is going on.
The corrections industry is a growth industry in this country, and I think that there are private interests that lobby quite effectively to have those public resources invested in them. I don't think it's a case where the public necessarily values the health of incarcerated individuals any differently than Indian people, but that's the way that it plays out when you measure the relative public investments.
I had problems with my teeth, and I remember I went in 3 different times and asked to have my teeth saved, but what wound up happening is I was told, oh yeah, we can save your teeth. What wound up happening was my teeth got pulled. I said, hey, I need those. I was born with those. Traditionally, we're meat eaters. And after that, it was kind of a 3 strikes and you're out type of deal.
I've had the wrong tooth pulled from the dental clinic here, and and could hear, the assistant, oh my God, I switched his X-ray with the, with the Indian lady down at at the end. These types of things make it very leery for any Indian person to go to the hospital. I have seen many cases, and being in the business that I am, in the newspaper business, numerous letters and complaints of allegations of being treated racist, talked down to, treated very disrespectful. We have a right to receive at least a little dignity, compassion, and respect.
We commissioned in the Congress a study of the problems of minorities in terms of getting health care in this country, meaning Black and Hispanic and Asian and Native American. And the study was done showing disparities everywhere, and the administration said, we're not going to put something like that out there. So they took it back and they rewrote the whole thing. And it was so deceptive that the first sentence in it was that, there's a few problems, and then they said, but there are many positive things. For instance, Indians have a lower cancer rate. They didn't mention that Indians have a shorter lifespan. So the fact they don't live long enough to get cancer doesn't even get factored in. I mean, they distorted what the facts were.
My view about Indian Health Service being designed to fail is that it is set up to meet, with the resources it has available, only 60% of the documented need for healthcare service delivery. I'm not talking here about extras like preventive health and maternal and child health, or special programs with diabetes or HIV/AIDS, or the administrative improvements that would give us the planning information to allocate resources better. I'm talking about documented primary health care needs.
The Lakota people, you have to understand that before the Vietnamese defeated the United States of America, we did. And we've been paying for it ever since. We gained a treaty out of the deal. We won. They begged us for peace. We gave it to them. And ever since then, they put us on these concentration camps they call reservations. And then they begin the slow strangulation of a people. IHS perpetuates the genocide.
I believe today that in certain respects it is remarkable that we continue to live and survive, and even in some respects thrive today, when we were so close to extinction at the turn of the century. I certainly share his belief that our people have been subjected to genocide. Clearly we have been in the past. Now today, today it's different. Today we don't have aggressive, overt measures taken against us. Things are much more covert and things are much more insidious. The prejudice and discrimination is much more institutionalized than it is aggressively carried out by individuals.
Our young people today are adopting American culture, whatever that is, or they're adopting a hip-hop rap culture, they're adopting a computer culture with violent video games, they're adopting the Hollywood violence, cinematographic violence culture. All of that is what's going through them. And how can you have healthy people when they, first of all, don't consider each other relatives or don't think that way, and they can't take care of each other? That was number one, because a long time ago, mostly the women, they were medicine men, of course, but the grandmas, they took care of the simple medicines that they could go out and gather. And maybe each grandma in a family would have 20 or so or 30 medicines she might use to cure things. His name is Chataokia, which means flying hawk, and he is my archery buddy and my hunting buddy. And he's 5 years old. And he and my other boys probably puppy meat and at ceremony, and then buffalo meat, deer meat, fresh fish, vegetables, those were their first meats. Those were their first foods. Even when he was 3 months old, any of these boys, we used to chew up meat and feed them just a little bit. By the time they're 6 months, chewing up more meat and feeding them. You see one?
Oh, this is your quiver here, Jay?
Yeah, that's my bow and my arrows, and I made them the way they would have made them a long time ago, and this is what I hunt with.
Can you show us?
Sure. My goal is to... when it's hot, look. Oh, okay.
You have that one.
Okay, my arrow, thank you.
You made this yourself?
Yeah. I make all my arrows.
I'm making you
Made my bow.
I'm making you. Mama, you make my bow. You make my water.
The first one you had when you were 2.
On the hop. And then those on with a nest.
If you want to get in good health, then I would suggest anything traditional will put you in good health. This is 62 pounds of pole. We don't shoot like Europeans would shoot this way. We shoot instinctively. We shoot at a 45-degree angle like this. And where I let off my arrows is about 50 to 55 pounds, so it's enough to drop a buffalo. And I took down a buffalo off horseback with this bow.
Good job.
Mainly, we want to show our youth, get our young people involved in healthy things. If you learn, exercise your traditional values, our ancestors at one time were bowmasters, they were horse masters, and not only is that great exercise and fun and a traditional thing to do, but if you learn archery and then you learn how to hunt, you're going to bring home healthy food as opposed to if I hunt up in the hills and I knock over an elk or a deer, if I get a turkey, I know the label when I lift up their tail says turkey meat, deer meat, elk meat, antelope meat. If I go to the grocery store and buy pork or beef or chicken, there's so many nitrates and chemicals and hormones that are in those animals that I don't know what it is anymore, but it's definitely not meat, whatever they do to it. And I think one of the steps to a good health, again, is having that traditional diet.
Alcoholism has always been, I mean, we have no industry, you know, over 80% unemployment. Now it's almost 90% because of the government cutbacks. The health hospital is not, it's called a comprehensive hospital with one dentist, with no surgeons, one gynecologist.
At the same time, you know, utilization rates for our Indian Health Service facilities show that between 6 and 8 visits each year are made by every single man, woman, and child on our reservations here in western South Dakota. So, you know, although there may be some people who feel that way, clearly not most people feel that way. And in fact, whereas in the majority society, the average number of doctor visits for man, woman, and child is somewhere around 2.4 or 2.5. As I mentioned, it's up over 6 among our people. So there, in general, I don't think there's too very many people that are too adverse to presenting to the clinics.
I went to emergency, and the doctor that admitted me, after she admitted me, then another doctor took over. And he was like, I think to me, he was like stoned or something, like he didn't really know what he was doing.
We have had a history of receiving, very poorly trained doctors. People have either experienced personally, have suffered at the hands of these people, or know of family members. I have an aunt a few years ago that was misdiagnosed. They gave her the wrong medication for her. She died within an hour after taking her medication.
So if it's a matter of an ambulance that drives and then the ambulance doesn't get, they get half their money because the Indian Health Services, that's all we pay, well, why would you drive out there? Why go? So if I'm going to lose money driving out to pick somebody up and bring them back in, it's hard to say that you would do it if you were driving an ambulance. I mean, you got to make a living. You got to pay for the gasoline, pay for the driver, and all the rest. So you can't make it up in the volume by losing money on every case.
There never was a disease here or health crisis a long time ago. You had a way of life that was very healthy. People were active and they lived outside all the time. People were gathering prairie turnips, choke cherries, buffalo berries, wild plums, wild asparagus, wild artichoke. There's a lot of cactus. There's a lot of things that grows on the prairie, even in the badlands that most people don't know about, that one can not only survive off of, but is very healthy. Again, this is government surplus. It's produce that the government has contracts with farmers across the United States. Farmers grow crops. They have to be able to sell them to keep their farms going. The government will buy out these crops, and commodity food programs are not only something for Native Americans, but people on welfare in this country have often gone in for commodity foods at food banks. The problem is in the past, commodity foods have been so unhealthy with all the corn starch, the fat, the sugar, the oils, the palm seed oil, the salt. There's a lot of stuff that was never in our traditional diet. So out of that, you developed a extremely high rate of diabetes, heart disease, obesity. A lot of health problems have plagued our people due to the use and abuse of commodity foods.
The other product that we had, I can recall graphically, was chipped beef. This was a byproduct from making steak, and it was it wasn't ground up like ground beef, but it was literally it was chips of beef. And these chips of beef were packed in pure lard. And they came in a little silver can. It bore a U.S. Department of Agriculture black writing on the can, and it was just chipped beef. And it was packed in lard. So my grandma, like many grandmas, would open it up. She'd empty out the whole contents in a pan and kind of fry it all up together. And here you're taking the beef and you're frying it up in pure lard. Of course, you may not want me to mention that also what they used to hand out in commodities is pure lard. A whole can of lard, just lard, and nothing but lard.
There is a new killer out there now, and that killer is obese. 1 out of every 5 children on our reservation is obese. Everybody blames the commodities. Everybody blames that. That is one of the biggest myths I've ever known. I call that a lie because of the simple fact that at the end of the month, everybody eats commodities because their monthly income doesn't last all month. Because it don't last is you buy with the food stamps that are given you, you buy pop, candy, potato chips, things, fatty foods, things that will really be detrimental to your health. And when those are expensive. If you look on the reservation shelves of all the grocery store, that's all they sell. Potato chips, pop, and candy. No exercise, the TV and the gang movies and the gangster movies. You have set that pattern on yourself. You have set your lifestyle as destruction.
Family is the basic core of who you are. Each family member has a contribution to the family. Our value system is completely different. Mainstream society, what can I get? What can I attain? Traditional Indian value, what can I give away? The measure of a man is by what you can do for others. So it's a complete reversal of a mainstream society, which is to attain everything that you can, and unfortunately trample whoever you need to in the process.
Hey, my stud, checking us out. Nasio.
The president's talking about providing universal health care for Iraqis. Huh? What about for Americans? I mean, it's really, it was stunning when that statement came out of the White House that they were going to provide health care and water and all this for everybody in Iraq, when we know that isn't true in the United States.
If the president says that in this territory we now occupy, that health care will be free to Iraqi citizens, I think that that's a wonderful gesture and inexpensive way to assure the next generation of healthy, strong citizenship. Why don't we have that in this country? I don't have an answer for that.
I've heard, from a very few good sources that, some of the administrators have received pay increases. I guess, it goes a little higher up, I think, than just Sioux with, the federal government's management of that program. It needs to be revamped. I think it needs to be investigated. And, there's some serious questions that arise from that. The funding isn't there. It's been cut every year.
We have to look at what John F. Kennedy said about the United States. He said, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Well, we're going to have to use that as, ask not what your treaty can do for you, but what we can do for the treaty and our livelihood.
The main prescription has to do with tribes being able to control their own destiny and serve the needs of their own people. Tribes know their people best. This is not a matter for the federal government to be directly involved. In my opinion, federal government needs to make the resources available, but it needs to get out of the business of delivering those healthcare services. And for tribes that don't have the capacity yet to deliver healthcare services to their people, the federal government needs to be in the business of helping those tribes develop that capacity.
What I have always said with the American Indian movement since our founding in 1968 is we have demanded the abolishment of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Think about it now. Every American with any kind of integrity should not and would not, if they have integrity, would not allow their government to have a Bureau of any kind of ethnic affairs, because there is no Bureau of Jewish affairs. There is no Bureau of Irish affairs, of African affairs, Mexican affairs, Cuban affairs, at all. But we have a Bureau of Indian Affairs. That's absolute institutionalized racism, and every American is a racist. He's an anti-Indian, genocidal racist, because they allow that Bureau of Indian Affairs to exist, for crying out loud, in allegedly the greatest democracy in the world. You know what? I want to know how I felt when the Twin Towers were hit? I'm not going to tell you. I said, you want to know? Find out. Be oppressed for a century or two.
We have a lot of alcohol problems here on the reservation. It's been here for years, but it seemed to be getting worse. We have bootleggers here on the reservation that, our reservation is considered a dry reservation. What I mean by that is there's no alcohol allowed on the boundaries of the reservation, but still we sell it to people. We have surrounding towns here that sell, that have liquor stores, and our people are going to get it no matter what. And our law and order system, is trying to deal with it. But the real problem is, I think it's time that people stepped forward and looked at the issue. You know, our police department cannot handle this alone, and I really feel that districts have to get involved. You know, we got drugs here on this reservation that just deteriorating our youth, and that's a sad thing to say.
Well, there's so many issues on alcoholism, and I'm not against alcoholism, and I'm not for it either, because I speak from things that people have told me and what I've seen, and I'm merely trying to explain that alcohol is a substance that your forefathers that fought so hard to keep that land didn't use and abuse. Alcoholism, I believe, would be the forefront to put a curb on that issue and the drugs, which is causing a lot of health problems to this date. Like here in Rapid City, the people that drink and utilize our hospitals, I call them the millionaire drunks, because some of them, they go downtown and they panhandle for their drinks, and when they get their drinks and then an accident happens, or they get in a fight, get stabbed or cut or shot or run over by a car accident or clubbed or something, the police call the ambulance, and the ambulance comes and picks them up, takes them to Sioux. Sioux refers them to, if they need it, to go to a regional hospital, and when the ambulance carries them to regional hospital, the bill is now in 600 bracket. And then when you go through surgery, etc., and stuff like that, and by the time it's all said and done, you're looking at maybe $25,000, $30,000 out of the account, where people who are trying to raise a family and do good, and the young couples, and they can't even get IHS help. One person said it good, and he said it in an appropriate way. He said federal prisoners and state prisoners get better health care than urban Indians.
Alcoholism is, is a problem that has been addressed. There's been a lot done with, and now this is within the tribal programs itself. But honestly, yes, it exists. It's there. When you look at many times, and there's many contributing factors, but a complete lack of being able to get off. Many times you feel like you're held prisoner on the reservation. It's a day-to-day struggle just to survive, despair. I myself grew up on the reservation until I was 16 years old. You do feel like you're literally doing time.
The research that I'm aware of is pretty strong research that suggests that Indians are much more liable to be addicted to alcohol. And we started out from the very start by giving them fire water as part of the trades that we used to make back in the days of the traders, the Indian traders who were put out there by the Indian Bureau. And so we've been feeding them alcohol for a long time, and they simply can't handle it. And it is a huge problem for which we have never really taken responsibility or put together the alcohol rehabilitation effort that we should make if they are our responsibility under the treaties.
The driving force behind my sobriety was first of all seeing my father struggle with that all his life. As a boy, it was really hard to see someone who you adore and you love and you look up to. Your parents, when you're a child, they say that mom and dad, in our language, ina or ate, is the word for God on the lips of all children, And when you see that person that you love and look up to, who is everything in your whole universe, suffer and hurt themselves and hurt others, it's a hard thing to deal with emotionally. So I think seeing my father suffer like that. I never wanted him to suffer like that. I always wanted him to quit drinking. Seeing my older brother follow in his footsteps, and eventually my older brother lost his arm, his right arm. He's a Vietnam vet, and he came back in one piece physically from Vietnam, but he did a lot of drinking and a lot of drugging after that, and he wound up drinking and drugging and falling asleep at a party, going into a coma, fell asleep on his arm, and he had his arm amputated because the blood flow got cut off. I had uncles and aunties that helped raise me from the age of 4 to 8 because my dad was drinking, my mom was hospitalized, and my aunties and uncles were always drinking. So I think it was harder for my older brother, and he was never able to get out of that cycle. But for me, seeing them and saying, okay, well, this is Dad, this is my older brother, is this what my life's going to be like? I don't have to choose that. I can be the one in my family, the first male to break that cycle. One of my grandfathers was killed in the 40s going across the road on crutches. He had a broken leg, and he was drunk coming out of a bar, and he got hit by a car. They wouldn't admit him to a white hospital, so they drove him to an Indian hospital, 2.5-hour ambulance ride, and he died on the way.
You know, I see that there's some hard drugs, according to the police force as well as community members, that it's starting to, you know, affect our youth in learning. You know, they don't care to do anything anymore. So I think we have a serious problem here. And what it has to be is that the communities have to do more awareness. The family's going to have to get involved. We're going to have to hold people liable for this. And what really puzzles me is that we know who's doing it, but nothing's being done.
If you're an alcoholic, you get pension, you get a house, and every time you go to treatment, it's $3,700. And some guy, I know one person who's been in treatment 57 times. So you look at 57 times 3,000, 4,000. Now, that money was appropriated to the Indian people because of the treaty, not to a drunk.
You know, when you compound that on the fact that you know, three of the top 10 poorest counties in America, including the 1st, 7th, and 9th poorest counties in America, are western South Dakota Indian Reservation counties. You know, it's not a stretch to see how we may have, you know, quite serious problems with drinking among those who do drink. You know, our people don't have beautiful 2,500 square foot suburban ranch style homes with 2-car garages to go hide behind at the end of the day.
There's a lot of wonderful things and a good way of life that you'll miss out on if you keep choosing to drink. And me, I don't judge anybody. That's how I was raised. I don't want to say, don't do this because, you shouldn't do this because. It's up to each person. But that alcohol, it's not from here. It's not something that our people have developed an immunity to, like Europeans have. Over thousands of years, Europeans have developed immunity to wine, beer, ale, alcohol. And it's been here relatively a short time, 200 years, maybe. If you don't find something within yourself, you can't plug into other people or other things for happiness. You'll never fill that hole that's there. And it's hard for people that are drinking or doing drugs to understand that until they come out of it. Then you can look back and say, I understand what that hole was that wasn't filled before. But you have to fill that with your own, whatever you're going to be into. First of all, you can fill that with prayer, whatever way you pray. You know, you can fill that with self-respect, with loving yourself, trusting yourself. It's only when you deal with yourself and you start working on yourself that you can really love, understand, trust other people.
Alcoholism and any type of, you know, chemical abuse is directly linked to domestic violence. So, you know, getting a handle on one, and again, that it starts with, you know, education. And there's been some programs with mentoring programs from some young men. There's a program in Rapid City here that's, you know, I'm very familiar with, that encourages young Indian men to be positive role models and to mentor some of our younger men, you know, to avoid that, you know, that this is not our traditional way. And so there's been some strong efforts to make changes there. But yes, they are directly linked.
When you talk about things like domestic violence nowadays, you go back to the past. Domestic violence, incest, rape are big issues. A long time ago, those were dealt with swiftly and harshly. There's a story of a man, they called him Yellow Kettle, who had raped one of his nieces. And immediately the girl had gone to her family crying and told her family what happened. The whole family got their rifles, their bows, clubs, even the women. And they chased that man into a teepee where he put a brass kettle over his head to hide in. And they killed him on the spot.
Clearly, the many records and many studies have shown that there's a very high correlation between alcohol use and the perpetration of domestic violence within families and in communities. So, you know, a big effort to combating domestic violence would be to combat individuals' heavy and binge drinking episodes themselves. Now that alone is not going to take care of all of the domestic violence that's occurring, but it would probably take care of a good share of it. And it would also take care of a good share of the accidents and unintentional injuries that are killing so many of our people.
The domestic violence scene is the same. I mean, whether the husband takes it out on the wife or the kids is just his own choice or whatever, and it's not conscious. They don't sit down and say, let's see, I'm going to beat somebody. But the frustrations of being out of work all the time, I mean, the frustrations of unemployment on Indian reservations is huge. And when you get into the city, it's not much better. And so you've got all the elements that lead to that kind of behavior in a family.
Yeah, domestic violence occurs mainly when, you know, when the person is intoxicated or when they really need their, you know, their drug, their marijuana, and then there's some people here, you know, coke is going around here. Cocaine has been going around lately here, and it's spreaded through the whole reservation right now. I know a couple people, you know, who do, you know those people who sell it, and it's really terrible because they get really cranky and they really, you know, can really put up a fight if they don't have it, and they can just hurt the little ones around them, especially. They're being neglected, and you know, they get abused because the parent or whomever the person is wants their drug or their alcohol.
Oh, you know, this reservation, believe it or not, they have a crime of emotional abuse. In other words, if you know, women have such control on this reservation, you can't complain about dinner, man. Otherwise, it's 911. You know, emotional abuse and off to jail you go. Wouldn't it be nice if that was the law in the United States? I suffered emotional abuse. You're right. It drives you crazy. It makes you insane. It's the worst kind of abuse. And that's what the boarding schools put in place. Emotional abuse. Shaming. They indoctrinated our culture with low self-esteem that is exacerbated again from generation to generation. One of the things that we have happening today that, believe it or not, directly affects our health is a lot of the young people are losing the language. Within the language, our elders will tell you that the language is sacred. It has the power of life and the power of death in it, any language. But when you lose your own language, then you lose your cultural identity, and you lose a self-respect and a respect for others that's built into that language. The Lakota, Dakota, Nakota languages, elders say,
They're from the universe. They're from everything natural. Unlike Europe, they had no other outside influences. So they came from natural sounds, from animals, from the wind, from trees, from the earth, from water. So you have a language that has that in it. Along with that, our young children are losing a sense of kinship. A long time ago, everyone was referred to as a relative. Now the only time that our children say that is when they're done praying. Mitakuye oyasi. Recognizing and acknowledging our relationships to everything in creation. My grandpa Stephen used to say when he was young, he'd walk across the reservation, and if a man was 400 yards away, he'd put up his hand and wave, and he'd say, "How Transhi?" Greetings, cousin. And that man will walk all the way over there. They'll shake hands, even if they're not related.
You have kids that come to school that want to sleep in classrooms, which they probably had a tough night, with partying and drugs, and they're having a hard time. I really feel sorry for these kids. And then you look at our housing situation here. When you have 3 to 4 families living in one house, how can a kid really do good or do well in school with the atmosphere out there? And the thing is that if we don't take action here very shortly, I feel that things are going to get very bad here on this reservation.
Some kids around here, their parents, they have them. The parents don't know, but these kids are starving and they're hungry, and they're cold too, and they need their parents to give them warmth. They need to take care of them, and that's really, I wish I could do something, and these parents with the kids who don't go to daycare because the parents are drink and stuff, and they don't have nice clothes and stuff to use to daycare, and so they know if they went to daycare, they would tell social services on them because they're neglecting their children.
Among our community here, there's a lot of alcohol problem that we have among young kids, especially the teenagers, and there's a lot of older person that die of alcohol, the cirrhosis, suicide, car wrecks.
Listen, understand something here. We live in enforced poverty by the government. This is planned poverty. When you have poverty, you don't have any choice other than survival. You don't have even the luxury of thinking beyond today because you have to make it through the day. Come with me to our trash dumps, our horrible trash dumps that the IHS refuses to clean up, even though they're mandated to do it. And you will see my people digging through trash. My people, the descendants of my ancestors who on the field of battle defeated the United States of America and made them beg for peace. They're reduced to digging in trash. I cringe every time I have to take my trash to the dump.
Now, I've got nothing against black rap. Why can't we have Indian rap? Indian rap telling about diabetes. Indian rap telling about money being ripped off. Indian rap telling about the treaties, etc. Black rap was originated from the black people to get out of the ghetto. When you go to a big city, all you're going to learn is lie, cheat, and steal, and gangs, and drinking, and alcohol. And when you go back home, that's what you take back.
What we need is some counselors here that, we have some, but it's not enough to go around. And that really disturbs me. We constantly send people to treatment, but actually there's no aftercare when they come back. So, after a while they're back in the same boat again. So there's got to be some real serious things looked at here on this reservation.
I know there's a lot of violence that's going on by drinking And by hearing other people come and they tell me that they have a gang fight because of drinking, they're having a party and then there's something else, something that happens there.
Racism is a really big issue. It has an effect on the jobs, where you shop, and where you go. Sometimes you can pass a person and you go Rapid City and you pass a person and they just look at you and they say something, and it really is hurtful. And in Chadron, at the Walmart there, I guess I heard rumors that they talk about the Indians that go there, and on the first of the month they said, here comes all the prairie and ends and just recently there's a story I read in the article in the newspaper, and here there's a man who worked there, and he was really put down, and he was threatened, and the people would say, the workers would say, oh, there's still that law where a person can kill an Indian, and they threaten him like that, and that's scary.
Hollywood is the most racist institution in America against the American Indian and perpetuating the racist stereotypes that contributes to the genocide of my children and my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren, because I've got 3 great-grandchildren, by the way.
I think that the hardest thing for youngsters on the reservation is to keep any kind of hope alive that they can have a reasonable life. It is very difficult to do that. I only see one way that one can possibly get anywhere with any kind of certainty, and that's through education. And I really think that kids ought to be looking at that. There are possibilities, and there are people who are willing to help. And I think that if people lose their hope, then they look for ways to just kind of waste their time or take away the pain, and alcohol and drugs are much too easy to get for people who are in pain and don't see any hope. So I really think kids ought to look at it as there is a way out of this, and it's through the educational route, and I'm going to get myself an education, whether I have to, I go to school. If that isn't enough, I'm going to add to it, or some way I'm going to get somebody to help me.
I've seen students that would come to school, they're mad, especially on Monday mornings. They're mad, they're uncontrollable because they've had a bad weekend. Mom got beat up and in the hospital. Dad went to jail, so they're home alone.
They lost sleep for the weekend.
Lack of sleep. They're hungry. And they can't function right because of it. Can't do their schoolwork. So it's everywhere, child abuse and child neglect. Elderly abuse too.
Young people nowadays are losing respect for the elderlies, and I as a youth, as a younger person right now, I think that is true, because they don't sit down and they don't talk with them, or they just ignore them, or they just push them away, and they don't listen to them. And they said it'll be harder for the older people now, in this century right now, for the older people like the tribal councilmen and everything, and all these guys on the board and everything. It's going to be harder for them when they get old, because there will be no respect. Hardly anybody, youth will respect them.
The Lakota culture is based on the Tioshbiye concept, or the concept of the broad extended family units that are known as Tioshbiyes. And in the Tioshbiye, there's certain duties and responsibilities that are there, and the duties and responsibilities speak to the intactness and the wholeness of this broad extended family as one, and the rights and responsibilities that each member has in terms of supporting one another and providing care and support for one another. A simple way to describe that is, within a Tioshbiye, you may have multiple mothers, you know, women who you actually call mother, who actually call you their child, and whom your relationship is very much like that of a child to a mother. Only instead of just having one, you'll have multiple of those.
If you have two dysfunctional parents, you know, in a household, naturally the child's going to suffer. So it makes it very hard, you know, on the child itself. Now we have a unique situation in our culture with having, you know, extended families. You know, many times our grandparents become parents, aunts, uncles, you know, things along that line. You know, I guess one of my concerns with that is the, you know, Indian Child Welfare Act. We have a lot of our young Indian children that are taken out of the home. And now if there is, you know, domestic violence taking place, you know, I advocate that. The child needs to be removed from the home. But is it really benefiting the child for the state to come in and to take them out of their culture and to put them in an environment that they have no familiarity with? And going back to, you know, our unique culture, we have extended families. We have aunts, uncles, you know, grandparents.
In the Lakota culture, we have 7 commandments. And the number 1 commandment is health. So if you could teach your young about health, the health problems that are and how they originated. One is to respect yourself and where you came from and who you are and where you're going, to live with your Tioshpa and honor them. To have that openness to an eagerness to learn. And to have that respect and quietness is to sit and listen.
I come from a people who know that every blade of grass, every pine needle is a teacher. I know that we respect all of life, that the worst thing you can do is kill, because it's the easiest thing to do, is to kill. Step on a spider, slap a mosquito. That's how easy it is. But to live with your relatives and to understand they are relatives, that kind of thought and philosophy is capable of war. I told you our languages don't have it.
Well, you know, Kevin Costner did a wonderful job in trying to make it possible for somebody like me to get down in and understand what it might be like to be a Native American. I think the hardest thing for any of us is to put our feet in other people's shoes and to recognize the history and the culture from which they come and the experiences they've had and what makes them react to a situation differently than I would react to it. I mean, theoretically you can do it, but that movie gave you some of the experiential feelings that sort of let you understand what it would be like to be an Indian. And I think that that's a real creative masterpiece when you can help somebody else understand what it's like to be like in somebody else's shoes.
We don't have any word for second or third cousins. We don't have any word for great aunts or great uncles. Your second or third cousins can be anything from your brothers or your sisters to your cousins to your aunts or uncles. It depends on the relationship to you and partly the generational relationship to you, their age versus yours, etc., and several other ways of looking at it. So we have quite elaborate and much more tightly held notions of extended kinship than the general population has generally.
We go back to our culture. One of the values, you know, in our spirituality is humility. Say, for example, if 2 warriors went out on a hunt, and you know, and I'll take a little sidebar on that. Storytelling, most of our history comes from oral storytelling. It's an oral history. So these 2 warriors go out on a great hunt, and they come back and they tell the story. They sit around, and maybe he gets a little bit boastful. So it is the other person's place to bring him down to a level of humility. So there's some joking that would go on, and they would tease him to bring him back down to that level of humility.
My school, at that house over behind you, the Total Immersion School, is just such a program. It's a root of the sacred tree of life. And no matter how small we are, in the end, the Lakota are destined to survive because we still honor all the universe and our sacred Holy Land with all of our relatives, which includes everything that crawls and swims and lives within the earth, the wingeds, the four-leggeds, and the green things that grow from the earth.
Many disadvantaged or minority populations in this country cannot lay claim to having preserved yet as much of their culture as we have. We still have all 7 sacred rites that are still known to us and that in some fashion are still being carried out by us. We still have traditional healing ways and practices that we can continue to draw strength and wellness from.
In order a long time ago to live that way of life, it was a lot of hard work, making your tools and hunting equipment that you needed. Every part of the animal was used. So when the men weren't doing something, the women were doing something, whether it's the hide, the meat, the sinew of the animal. So all of that is a lot of exercise. And so we had that a long time ago, where today we have a lot of people eating pops and chips, pork, meat, milk, things that were never in our diet before. Sugar, salt, a lot of fats. And most people are not exercising enough. So they're sitting around drinking pop and chips, and a lot of people are just sitting there watching TV. And a lot of our youth have grown up watching their parents grow up in that type of generation. And so instead of being outdoors all the time, riding horses, shooting a bow, any kind of sports, there are families that are very healthy. But on the whole, there's a lot of families that are not. We call this timsila, and they call it a wild prairie turnip in English. It's very healthy. We pick these during the spring, about 2-3 weeks out of the year. The flowers will show their tops and then they'll fall off. So if you don't pick them during that time, you won't be able to find them. But the timsila or prairie turnip is really good traditional food, and it's very healthy. My wife's grandma talks about some of the medicinal qualities of this prairie turnip. One of the things is good for your kidney. It's really high in iron and calcium. When babies, a long time ago, the babies don't have an appetite, they'll crush up the timsila into a powder, mix it with water, and feed it to the baby, almost like formula, or like formula milk, and it will increase the baby's appetite.
Show me some of the other. I see you got some other fruits here.
These are chokecherry patties, and a lot of times people think they look like an oatmeal cookie, but we spent 2 solid days with our boys, our whole family. We harvested chokecherries, and the chokecherries are taken and they're pounded with the seed in them.
So too, we have in our culture the ability to adopt one another. I might get this wrong now. Perhaps you can help me. But in the general society, the common phrase is, you can choose who your friends are, but you can't choose who your relatives are. You're stuck with who your relatives are. Well, that's not true for a Lakota person. You can both choose who your friends are, and you can choose who your relatives are through the Hunka ceremony. And so, in that way, we enlarge our tioshpaye and enlarge our relationships with one another through the formal and ceremonial adoption of one another.
2 years ago, no, it was longer than that, about 4 years ago, I went to a video store and I checked out I was talking to the manager. And I asked him, I said, what do Indian people check out a lot? And he told me movies that are based on mafia, gangs, and really violent textures. So that's where a lot of that comes from, is what you see and hear on the screen.
You know, anyone who's ever been to a Lakota's powwow, even a powwow which has kind of been changed in its meaning nowadays, but yet still retains a great amount of cultural meaning and certainly the beauty and colorfulness of our regalia. You know, anyone who's managed to cast a glimpse on a real good traditional Lakota powwow can not help but be impressed by the beautiful display and expression of the culture. And all the time, non-native peoples, you know, I hear talking to one another or coming up to us and saying, you know, what an incredibly moving and beautiful experience this was for us to be able to experience. So, you know, we're very fortunate and we're very rich in the ability to be able to share something like that with people. You know, we do have very strong, in many cases intact, and very powerful cultures that we still continue to maintain through our tribal structures, through our Tioshpaye, and et cetera. And that we can draw upon those as a source of strength, and we certainly should draw upon those as a source of strength. For instance, in the Lakota culture particularly, you know, we have the culture in the way of the pipe. And there's a tremendous amount of strength, optimism, and encouragement that is contained within that pipe. Through that pipe, we have a very direct relationship with our Creator. And I realize that at times it's difficult to see that, it's difficult to know and believe in that. But if it were otherwise, if that were not the case, I do not think that we would have survived. You know, when at the turn of the century there were so very few of us, and we were very nearly extinct as a people.
We have a spiritual foundation that gives us our value system. We maintain that spirituality and those values, and our matriarchal society will triumph. It's a prophecy by Black Elk. He says, maybe there's a root of the sacred tree of life still alive. We must find that root, nourish it, so the tree can once again grow and flower and mend our nation's hoop.